Hi, everybody. Welcome to my 4th annual migration celebration. We are celebrating migration from home. We're celebrating fall migration, 2 things that we wouldn't have done in April. We are so bummed that we don't get to see you, but it's important that we all stay safe. And we're so glad that you were able to join us today. Today, we're going to talk about native plants and how awesome native plants are and why they matter. So my name is Nessa. I'm the manager of scientific programs for Friends of Ballona Wetlands. We are championing the restoration of the Ballona wetlands, and we educate the public as environmental stewards. And part of that mission is to bring restoration home with you. So if you can't go out and do restoration in the wetlands, you can do restoration in your own backyard, front yard, patio, or even inside your house. I am growing a native fern in my bathroom in the window. So we're going to talk about all that cool stuff here today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy it. When I share my screen with our presentation and our videos, make sure you maximize the GoToWebinar viewer so that you can really see the images and the videos that we're showing you. If you have any issues, please use the chat box to talk to our organizers, and they'll do the best to help you out. So we are recording this so that we can upload it to the web page right afterwards. So if anything goes wrong, you still have another chance to view the webinar. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, we're talking about growing California native plants. You have a bunch of handouts in the control panel. We have a do-it-yourself gardening guide. It was created by the El Segundo Blue Butterfly Coalition. So it has details about how to make habitat for El Segundo blue butterflies, but it also covers everything. So it will help you evaluate your yard, figure out your sun, your soil, everything you need to do before you decide what to put where. So check out the DIY guide. You can download all the handouts from the control panel. We also have an amazing list of resources that Lisa Fimiani, one of our special guests who we'll hear from later, put together with links to all kinds of useful information. That's our garden resources guide. We also have a list of native garden contractors. So if you don't want to do it yourself, you can get some help. Or you can have somebody who really knows how to work with native plants come and help you care for your yard. We also have a plant list to help you get started. And for those of you who don't have a yard, or you also want to put plants on your patio or your balcony, we have a container gardening guide. So what are native plants? What does that even mean, right? Native plants occurred here before European settlement, and they evolved here over thousands of years. So plants that only arrived in the last couple hundred years because of humans bringing them in from other places, those don't count as native. These plants were here when the original Californians were here thousands of years ago, and these are the plants that they used for sustenance, for building their homes, for everything. These plants co-evolved with animals, fungi, microbes, and they formed complex relationships. So they all work together. They are really dependent on one another, and they've evolved together, and that's why they're so supportive for wildlife. And they're just the foundation of our natural ecosystem and our community. We need them just as much as they need the ecosystems that they live. So why grow native? It will help your water bill because these plants are evolved to deal with the types of water systems that we have, the natural droughts that we have, the rain only for some reason occurring in the winter and dumping all at once. Native plants are adapted to those sorts of situations. You'll also have more free time because native gardens are a lot less work. You don't have to trim your lawn all the time. You don't have to apply pesticides. So you're going to have so much more free time to just enjoy your garden instead of having to take care of it all the time. It actually helps with your allergies because they don't produce as much pollen as native weeds do. Of course, they support wildlife. They help clean our air. They're our natural air conditioners. They are important for our ecosystems, and they're just beautiful. So the main thing we're going to focus on today is why they are important for wildlife. As a wildlife organization, we want to plant native plants to help wildlife as well as humans. So wildlife are threatened by a lot of things. They're losing their habitats. Habitat loss is the #1 reason why species go extinct. And that's because of development, farming, filling of wetlands, things like that, to make space for humans. So if you could take your yard and turn it into a native habitat, you're helping to reverse some of that habitat loss, which is super important. Exotic invasive native plants are also part of the reason why wildlife are having a hard time, because wildlife generally doesn't get as much resources from exotic plants, sometimes none at all, depending on what species it is. They don't recognize the exotic plants as being food or resources. They also have trouble with non-native predators like cats. Please, please, please keep your cats indoors. Cats are one of the #1 causes of bird loss in North America. So cats belong inside, or you could put a cute little bib on them and that'll prevent them from catching birds. Urbanization also leads to habitat loss, pollution, all kinds of things like that, heat island effect. Climate change is a big one. We're going to have a lot of changes coming ahead of us that having native plants in your yard will help combat. And pesticides and rodenticides. So we definitely want to only use organic treatments. There are books that have tips and tricks on how to deal with different pests, but bugs are important to our ecosystem. So if we want to try to keep them, the native bugs anyway, as much as possible. All right, so we are planting native gardens to help wildlife. They combating habitat loss, providing food, water, and shelter, so places for birds and other wildlife to find food, to take a rest, to when they're migrating down the Pacific Coast Highway, they see your perfect little green, beautiful yard, and they say, that's where I want to hang out, not on this person's lawn over here. And big changes are possible. So here is, there's a bunch of photos I'm going to show from the California Native Plant Society and from the Theodore Payne Foundation. So here's a transition from a water-sucking lawn to a beautiful California native-friendly garden, providing sustenance for wildlife. Also uses a ton less water. So here's some garden examples because gardens are beautiful and I want everyone to be inspired. They're colorful, they have structure, can have low gardens, tall gardens, fixtures. You can build a rain garden so your water has someplace to go. They can be green, they can be colorful. You can have nice little walkways between them so you can explore your garden. We have great native trees and shrubs, so you don't need to give up trees. They blend in beautiful with all kinds of architecture and house structural elements. The variety of native plants is just incredible. The flowers provide sustenance for all kinds of different animals here. We've got some tube-shaped flowers for hummingbirds. They can be in your front yard too. Show off your native plants to your neighbors so they can see how awesome you are. Here's a coastal garden. Here's a photo from provided by Theodore Payne. It's a beautiful tree in the back there. We'll hear about that later. You can put your gardens on the hills because native plants are adapted to deal with erosion. So if you have a big slope in your yard, native plants are the answer. So don't forget to download all of those handouts. If for some reason you can't download them, I can email me and I can email them to you later. And here are some images of some container gardens. So don't feel bad if you do not have a yard or if your friends and family want to grow native with you, but they don't have a yard, tell them containers are an option. All right, so we are going to answer any questions that we have so far before we continue our presentation. Anybody have any questions? It doesn't look like it. I'll wait just a couple more seconds to see if somebody's typing. Right. So now we're going to explore Lisa's garden. So Lisa Fimiani is the former executive director of Friends of Ballona Wetlands. She is a fellow at Loyola Marymount University, LMU Cures. Oh, we did just have a question come in. We'll finish introducing Lisa. So Lisa, do you want to turn on your video and show everyone your amazing shirt? There it is. So everyone meet Lisa Fimiani. She's wearing a Theodore Payne shirt, showing off the California poppy. And she is a master gardener, and she has been my inspiration for native gardens since we met 5 years ago, and I'm so grateful to know her. Lisa, thank you for being a part of this presentation. Is there anything you want to say before we start showing your garden?
Nope.
Okay. All right, don't forget to maximize your screen so that you can see the video. While everybody takes a second to do that. We have a question, what type of watering system is best for native plants? So we don't recommend drip irrigation because it doesn't usually give enough water for native plants. It's too localized. They really need a deep soak. So our native plants are used to getting a lot of water at once, like how our rains typically are, and then being okay with going dry. If you look in the DIY guide, it gives a whole overview of how to get your native plants established, because the first year when you're growing your native plants, they're going to need more water at the beginning, and then you'll taper off. There are a few kinds of native plants like riparian plants that may need more water because they're used to being along stream sides. So those are what you would maybe put with your rain garden. But deep soaking, so using overhead sprinklers or watering by hand is generally the way to go. But I would refer to the DIY guide for an overview. Lisa, do you have anything to add about watering?
No, other than you want to mimic the seasonal rains of an area. So, we get in Southern California months of no rain and then all of a sudden a deluge. And they like to be deeply watered and then dry out. So it's trying to mirror that system of natural watering. And it's a challenge because you have to walk your garden to figure out, is the plant in trouble? Is it doing okay? I've had a lot of challenges in my home garden, but that's part of the fun and part of the mystery of it all.
Right. Okay, we have one more question. Would the overhead sprinkler need to be at a certain height? So that depends on what you plant and the way that your area is structured. So that's kind of a hard question to answer. If you wanted to talk later, you could send pictures and we could try to give you some advice on that. You just want to make sure that it's reaching the areas that it needs to reach. So if it needs to be taller so that it can get over a shrub so it could still water something in the back, that's something to consider. If it's in front of just a bunch of ground cover plants, then it doesn't need to be as tall. So it kind of just depends on the structure of your garden and what size plants you're planting. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's explore Lisa's garden. Don't forget to maximize your screen so you could see the video.
This is my garden. I'm welcoming you to an 8-year-old garden, and I'm introducing you to 2 books that I highly recommend you read. They're both by Douglas Tallamy. The first one he wrote, Bringing Nature Home, was back in 2007. The second one is Nature's Best Hope. And what I'm showing you now is a rose bush in my, and it's California rose, and it smells delightful. Roses, as you may know, are 35 million years old. They've been around the earth for quite some time. There's an old wives' tale, and I think it's true, that the California rose bush actually was used for cottage gardens in Europe. What you're seeing now is a California Encelia, or sunflower, and you can see there's a bee enjoying the sunflower. I have a scrub oak in my front yard. As you'll find out if you read Douglas Tallamy's articles and his books, oaks are, in his opinion, one of the most important trees to have in your yard, and I agree. This is Baccharis pigeon point buckwheat, and you can see that it's growing well. This is white sage over in the corner of my garden. I love the white sage. I have 3 different kinds of sages in my garden. Lilac verbena, delamina, which is very, very fragrant. I'm trying an experiment this year. I'm putting in some pollinator plants that aren't necessarily native. This is called brown-eyed girl. It's attracting wildlife, but I think I'd prefer to use the natives. This is a wasp on a rosemary blossom in my garden. Here's a marine blue butterfly on some buckwheat. I actually have the buckwheat that would attract El Segundo blues. Here's a fiery skipper on a buckwheat blossom. They're so cute. Every day is an adventure in my garden. I never know what I'm going to see. This morning I saw a beautiful digger bee. This is called hot lips sage, which is kind of hilarious. And this is in my backyard. Next to it, I have a California grape, Rogers Red, which in another month or so, all those leaves will turn bright red. It'll remind me of living on the East Coast where I'm from. This is another skipper butterfly on tick seed, or Coreopsis. Unfortunately, this is not the native tick seed Coreopsis, but I tried it anyway because I want to see how it does. This is one of my favorite plants in my garden, Indian mallow. And to my delight, when Nessa came over to videotape, we saw 2 Sonoran bumblebees nestling themselves in the blossoms of the Indian mallow. They were just so cute. Look at the pollen on that bee's legs. Hilarious. And so important that you have plants in your garden that our local bees and insects and birds can use. This is a very docile bumblebee. It's not going to come flying after you to sting you. They're beautiful to watch. Here you're going to see native narrowleaf milkweed. And then in the foreground, I'm trying another manzanita. And I say another because my first one died. Don't be upset if things die in your garden. Keep trying. Here you see, we're going fast now. Here you see California fuchsia and also Baja snapdragon. Again, I like to put in things with texture, color, flowers to attract all different kinds of wildlife. In the background, you can see I have a rosemary bush. That was in the garden when I moved in. You know, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Integrate in an existing garden native plants. Here's Ceanothus centennial in full bloom. I bought this at Theodore Payne. Here we have branching phacelia and poppies. This was during the springtime. The purpley magenta flowers you see are elegant clarkias, just gorgeous. And here is a sea of poppies in my front yard. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to go native. And I put up signs in my yard. My yard is registered as a certified wildlife habitat, pollinator habitat, and monarch way station. And I want to leave a quote with you at the end. You're seeing also nesting material. Here's some house finches that are enjoying a bird feeder that I have out in my front yard. I like to feed the birds, and I get a lot of people stop by looking at the birds in my garden. They really enjoy them. Here's some lesser goldfinches enjoying some Niger seed or thistle. I buy my bird products from Wild Birds Unlimited in Redondo Beach by a gentleman who's a former board member of the Friends, and the store is fabulous. If you want to check it out, they have really healthy, fresh seed for the birds and all kinds of products that you can investigate and consider putting in your garden. So the numbers of wildlife in my yard, I've counted over 100 plants and about 84 different insects and birds and other wildlife mammals. That compares to Susan Gottlieb's garden in Beverly Hills, which is on the Theodore Payne Garden Tour, and she has over 700 species. So I'm about 200, she's about 700. My garden's been going about 8 years, hers has been going for about 20 years. So you can see how you can accumulate and you will draw more wildlife the longer your garden is in existence. Again, no pesticides, no herbicides. Keep your garden free of all that so that things can thrive. We cannot emphasize enough how important your garden is going to be in the future. If you read either of Doug Tallamy's books, you will see we're now really at a tipping point. And I'm going to leave you with this last quote from Doug. Because life is fueled by the energy captured from the sun by plants, it will be the plants that we use in our gardens that determine what nature will be like 10, 20, and 50 years from now. Think about it. Your garden is going to make a huge difference. And you can join us and be part of this movement. We can do this one garden at a time. I hope you join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was amazing. All right, if anybody has any questions for Lisa, go ahead and type them into the chat box and we will read them off. We'll hang out for a few minutes while you take your time to type. I just really want to echo what Lisa said, that it's really up to us to do what we can to stop climate change, to stop habitat loss, and we have the power to do it. And we're going to, as humans, benefit so much from it too. So for the love of wildlife and for the love of us. We have a question about a gray grass that was shown. Do you want to talk about your grasses, Lisa?
A gray grass. Well, I have June grass in my front yard. I also am utilizing the Bermuda grass that I tried to get rid of years ago. And because I'm always working in other gardens, I don't tend to my own garden as intently. So it keeps growing back. So now I'm using it as a pathway, garden path, grass path, but I don't use it as a big swatch of grass. And it looks a little gray this time of year because I'm not watering it. I use it to walk on, basically. So if you also saw some gray plants, you probably saw the California fuchsia. And you might have seen some of the buckwheat as well. I know it was the video was going kind of quickly, so it's hard to tell.
We could watch it again at the end if we have time. All right, we have some more. It'll also be available online, so you can watch it again. And then, so we have a question of, first a compliment, such a beautiful garden. And then what is your favorite native plant, Lisa?
Indian mallow, hands down.
That was easy. I thought it was going to be hard. So here we've heard the use of a phrase to explain how a native plant goes year to year. First year surviving, second year struggle. Oh, okay. So that's explained graphically in the DIY guide, but Lisa, do you want to talk about how when plants get established, the 3-year transition?
Sure. So someone who used to work for Theodore Payne, and Erin, I don't know if you remember her, Lisa Novick. Oh, she had a great saying. Native plants, this is what you have to remember about native plants. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. And if you think about it, native plants take a little bit longer to establish. They set deep tap roots, which is what you want. And once they're settled, once their feet are settled, ba-boom, they're going to take off. So you want to be patient. And again, try to mirror the water patterns in your area. I don't have irrigation in my garden. I hand water everything. And what I do is about once every 2 weeks, I deep water things. I just let the hose go. I walk away. I try to remember to come back, of course. And the plants are so forgiving. Native plants do not like constant watering. They'll get moldy. Their leaves will get moldy. You want to give them time to dry out, and you want them to get into the cadence of what they have spent millions of years adapting to, which is a lot of rain in the spring and winter, and then hardly any rain throughout the summer. And an occasional thunderstorm is what they're used to. So pretend to be a thunderstorm once a month in your garden, once they're established. But you've got to let them establish. Again, give them 3 to 4 years. My garden's 8 years old. It's taken 4 to 5 years for some of my bigger plants to really get established.
Yeah, that's right. I do the same thing, Lisa. I just soak it and forget about it for an hour and then come and check on it.
Yep.
So we have a question also about watering. If you have sandy soil, that can change things a little bit. Do you create a well, or how often do you water if you're planting in the fall with sandy soil?
Well, you know, Erin might be able to answer that a little bit better. I have clay soil. I'm in Mar Vista, but I do have friends and former clients that had sandy soil. And you're going to have to water a little more regularly because the water's going to go straight through that sand. And if you are able to assess whether there's an aquifer in the neighborhood that's running under your garden and your neighbor's garden, you know, perhaps water's being saved somewhere, but you're going to have to kind of watch that and pay attention. And I would say for sandy gardens, you're probably going to have to water a little more often. But again, with natives, it's once every 10 days to 2 weeks. It's not like every 3 days with your traditional, you know, ornamental water guzzling non-native plant garden. So go with this. This is really exciting that you can, you know, pull back on your watering and do it to the plant's cadence and not to the desire of having everything in bloom all the time. And that's another thing, you know, natives will take a rest towards the end of the year, and you've got to give them their time to, it's basically when they're regrouping for the spring. So a lot of people are under the impression that, oh, I can have flowers blooming all year round. Well, you can. You can force the plants by watering them continually, or you can give them their space to kind of take a breather. And it's also part of the process. I leave a lot of the dead blossoms on my plants, and I'm so glad I do. 2 years ago, I discovered longhorn bees were going to sleep in the spent flowers of my California Encelia. I came out one night and I'm watching these bees with giant antennas, because they have longhorn, you know, antennas, and they were all clustering on these dead flower heads of the Encelia. And I'm like, what is going on? And then they became still. Well, I didn't know what I had. I looked them up, and they were the longhorn bees. And this is something they do at night. The males, they cluster together, all these bachelors, and they go to sleep together on the dead flowers. Oh my God, what a discovery. So every day you will have the opportunity to discover something new in your garden like that, if you allow it to be natural as you can leave it.
And I would add for the sandy soil comment that you really want to put the right plant in the right place. So don't plant something that really wants to be in clay soil in a sandy area. So when you buy your plants, they should have little tags on them that tell you what kind of soil that plant prefers. Some plants will take any kind of soil, and then you could use that kind, or you can find plants that really like sandy soil, and so they don't mind drying out as much. So you're going to have to do more watering if you choose a plant that doesn't really like sandy soil. So just keep that in mind. You can create little berms around your plants when you first start to get them established. And generally, when you first plant, you're probably going to water once a week, maybe twice a week if it's really hot out and the soil's drying really quickly. and then you'll taper to 2 weeks after a few months, and they've begun to become established. But again, you're going to deep water. Sandy soil, you might water a little bit more frequently. We have a question. We have an apple tree and a plum tree in the backyard. Can they be incorporated into a native garden and veggie gardening? So I would say that the biggest thing with that is your watering scheme. So if you're going to be watering vegetable gardens and fruit trees regularly, make sure you don't plant things next to them that only want to be watered once a month, right? So I would keep an eye on that. Pick the plants that don't mind more of a garden style watering. There are definitely native plants that can tolerate that. And it's okay to keep your plants that you already have. You want to aim for 70–80% native to maximize the habitat value. But yeah, don't go chuck your favorite plants because you're trying to save the world. It's okay to feed yourself. So why is the plant you said is your favorite plant, Lisa? Why is it your favorite plant?
I think because it's so beautiful, the color green, the softness of the leaves, and then the blossoms. Oh, I just love the blossoms. And look what the blossoms attract. These beautiful bumblebees. They are the cutest. The other bumblebee I get in my yard is the yellow-faced bumblebee, but I haven't seen many this summer, and I don't know why. And I'm kind of, keep paying attention to that in the back of my mind, thinking, I know they're around. I wonder where they're going. But yeah, it's the Indian mallow. Oh, just love it.
And just so you know, our native bees, which we have about 4,000 native bees in California, they most of them are non-aggressive. So you're not inviting like a war zone into your garden by planting plants. They are not there to attack you. They are mostly not. They don't build hives. They're not colonial. They're kind of on their own. They find places to hide. Sometimes they group together. Sometimes they're just looking for a hole in a stem to sleep. So they're very much more individualized than the typical European honeybee that most people might think of. So
and
we have
70% of them nest underground.
Right. Yeah. So it's okay to leave some dirt for your bees. Yep. So we have a question from a 6-year-old. Thank you so much. How do poppy seeds fly so that they can grow? So you want to talk about seeding?
Nessa, that's a great question, because one of the fun things that happens with poppies is that as the seed stem comes up, and it's green at first, it's got seeds in it and it's green, it starts drying out. And then one day in the sun, with the heat of the sun, it goes pop, and these little black seeds like black pepper go everywhere in the garden. You can even hear it some days. It's amazing. That's how they fly. They fly out of those pods.
That's awesome. I didn't even know that. So another watering question. So we mentioned that we leave a hose and we just soak stuff. And the question is, how do we do that? Are you moving a bubbler from plant to plant, or do you use a perforated hose? So I'm making use of both of those right now. I have a hose that has a nozzle attachment that has a soaker option. And I also have a bubbler. And so you can just move that around. I also have a sprinkler attachment for my hose for when I need to cover a larger area. And I have a perforated hose, but I only use that on a narrow area where I have like plants in a line, and sitting there and moving the hose between each one every 30 minutes would drive me insane. So I have a soaker hose there that follows the line of plants in a really narrow area. So you can adapt it to where your plants are. Lisa, do you have anything to add about that?
No, that's great advice. Get to know your garden. I walk my garden at least once every 10 days to 2 weeks. I wish I could do it more because it's fun. You never know what you're going to find. The other day I found a black daring jumping spider with its green fangs. And of course that sounds ominous and scary, but they're the cutest thing in your garden. And if you walk your garden, you're going to get to know your plants. Literally within a couple of days, you can tell if a plant has gotten enough water, if it's happy. Really pay attention to what's going on in your garden. It's really a playground and something to discover every day if you can. But if you can't, get out there as often as you can, and it's going to tell you things. So it's really the best advice I can give. And there's all kinds of equipment on the market. Get something that works for your lifestyle. There's no right or wrong here. The most important thing is that we bring back natives and that we incorporate them into our landscaping, especially our urban landscaping. There just aren't enough wild areas out there anymore. We've got to be part of the solution.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're looking to have a lower maintenance garden, pick plants that are lower maintenance, that they don't need to be watered as often, that they don't need to be pruned or cared for very often. Let your garden grow a little wild like Lisa's. If you want to spend more time, you can have a more manicured garden. That's totally fine too. You can deadhead your plants and keep it looking fresh all year round. It's a personal choice. Yeah, so really taking the time to be in your garden, the plants will tell you what they want, right? And also don't plant your plants too close together. I know it can be really exciting. You want to buy one of everything. I don't recommend that either. You should buy in groups. And when you plant them, make sure you pay attention to the spacing, because once they do get established in that third year and they take off and they grow really big, really fast, you don't want to be out there pruning every other day because you planted them too close together. So think for the future, even though it's kind of like being in a candy shop and you want everything. So when you go to that candy shop to buy your plants, we have a question. Someone who lives in Playa Vista, where's a good place to buy native plants? So the Marina Garden Center is nearby and does have a table with native plants and also some 5-gallon plants. I've gotten some great plants there. I'm sure Lisa has too. But there's also a list of other places in the DIY guide. And then shortly here, we're going to transition to Erin at Theodore Payne Foundation, which is, I think, both Lisa and my favorite place to go buy native plants.
Nessa, let me jump in really quick. The other local nursery nearby in Southern California, near Playa Vista, is International Garden Center on Sepulveda in, I think it's just past the airport on the right. And there's a car wash next door. The gentleman who runs that, Dino, is great. He has a huge stock of native plants and he'll work with you, he'll order. So will Kathy from Marina Garden Center. She loves natives, and she and I have worked together for years on this. I even did a presentation at her nursery with Scott Logan of Wild Wings, and we did it on butterflies. So she's always interested and likes to stock native plants. So you've got 2 local nurseries, but you're right, our favorite is Theodore Payne.
That's good, absolutely. And there are other typical nurseries like Armstrong and Green Thumb that do have some native plants, but you kind of have to go hunt for them and ask them where they are. Though I do encourage you to call those places and insist that they stock native plants, because until we get typical nurseries where most people go to stock native plants, it's going to be really hard to keep getting these plants into people's yards. And if you don't see the plant, you don't see how beautiful and awesome it is. So we need to get these plants out there. All right, we are going to thank Lisa so much. If there are any other questions that come up, we'll bring you back, but we are going to transition to Erin at the Theodore Payne Foundation. Erin, go ahead and turn on your camera.
All right. Hey, everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you guys so much. Lisa, that was amazing. It was really exciting to see your garden and hear about all of the creatures that are living there. And we're so lucky to live in this biodiversity hotspot and have so many different plants. Unfortunately, the definition of a biodiversity hotspot is not just that we have this huge, incredible number of plants, but that also 70% of the original habitat here has been lost. So everything that you guys have been talking about is just so exciting, because it's true. What you do in your yard creates habitat connectivity for these creatures to survive. So, and we are here for you. We are a native plant nursery in Sun Valley. So we are on 22 acres in a canyon. And so when you come out, it is a little bit like the Disneyland of native plant stores. But I really want to emphasize what you were both mentioning is that you should go to Home Depot and to Armstrong and demand that they offer native plants there, because as much as we love having you all out, we're not going to be able to create real change until this just becomes what you see in every parkway and every public space, and it just becomes completely normal. So we hope that that happens. So please do call those places. And in the meantime, if you want to come out and visit us, we have, in addition to being a nursery, we also have a lot of demonstration gardens. So you can actually see what the plants look like when they're fully grown, because sometimes you see this cute little plant and it has one tiny pink flower on it, and then you realize it's going to be 15 feet tall. So it's very, very important, as you guys mentioned, to know your soil, sun, and space. If you can figure out those three things before you come in to buy your plants, that's going to be really, really helpful. So we have been closed. Our nursery was closed to the public starting in March. We have contact-free plant pickup, but we're very, very excited to be opening to the public next Friday. So we have a members only soft opening for those of you who are already members. And then the week after that, we will have regular hours. You just need to sign up for an appointment slot. So we have a small parking lot and the nursery is small. We want everyone to be safe and feel comfortable. So, so there is limited slots for each hour, I believe. But it's pretty easy to sign up. And what else was I going to say about? And if you're still not comfortable going out with the general public, which I completely understand, and you want to limit your exposure, you can order plants online from us. So we have a new online store that's beautiful. It's really exciting to see that up right now. And so you can order plants and then just come and pick them up contact-free and not mingle. Although everyone will be wearing masks and you should feel very safe. So what else did I want to talk to you guys about? You guys covered so much already. It's like I had all these things I was going to mention, and you mentioned them all. It was a beautiful presentation.
Are you still doing virtual classes?
We are, yes. So we have virtual classes. We're teaching. I know there's a lot of questions about watering. We have a whole class about watering. It can be something that's, can be very complicated and very simple. I use the same method that you guys do. I have one hose, I turn it on really low so it's just dripping, and I set a timer and just move it from plant to plant. And I also have a 2-year-old, and so really the only plants that survive in my yard are those that survive off of neglect.
I'm the same way.
But it's amazing. These plants, once they're established, it's truly incredible how well they do. And I don't recommend neglecting your yard. They will be happier if you pay attention. And honestly, that's the best part. The way that you really get to know your garden and you make these discoveries, like Lisa, you were talking about seeing the digger bee this morning. The way those discoveries happen is when you're out there, when you're weeding or doing maintenance, checking things out to see who needs water. Those are the moments when you realize that each plant is its own little universe. And sometimes you might not notice that if you're just walking past. So
Totally. And you're going to see that universe much more on native plants than exotic plants. So having a native garden with children, I think, is great because they really get to experience a micro universe when they're walking around, and they're small, so they get to get really close to the plants and see those little guys. And when you're walking around a park, you're not going to see as much fun, cool insects, and you'll see butterflies that you've never even noticed before existed. So, and bees and everything. So it's just a wonderland.
absolutely.
And not to keep quoting from Doug Tallamy, but I have to tell you, he really was transformational for me back in 2008 when I picked up that book. And I remember coming to Theodore Payne, all excited, telling everybody there, have you read this book? Have you? And now you're stocking it and you're selling it. This is a quote that says it all to me. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share it. It's very short.
Please.
You don't have to cut down the lilacs. And he's talking about East Coast plants, but they are doing nothing for insects and birds. It's as if they were plastic. They're not hurting anything, except that they're taking space away from something that could be productive. And that just really hit me hard. It's nice to have pretty things in your garden, but if they're not attracting the wildlife that lives here, what are they there for? You know, they're not doing any good.
Absolutely.
There's probably a native plant that would be just as perfect.
Just as pretty, even prettier, and attract more interesting creatures in your yard.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things too with, you know, we live in this really unique geographical space where we have more than 10,000 feet of elevation between Mount Baldy and the ocean. And so we get all of these different microclimates. And one of the things that our seed department has been doing is a project called Local Source Initiative. Mm-hmm. And so to help protect all of the genetic diversity of the plants that are here, they get permission to collect seed in the wild. And then it's partnerships. We never go into the wild and collect seed unless you have a permit. And the purpose of this is for conservation. But our nursery is one of the only nurseries you can go to, and you can actually get plants that are from the hills, the foothills, you know, right above, mm-hmm. You know, if you are living in the Altadena area, or there'll be these purple tags and you'll see, they'll tell you which area they're local from. So it's this hyper local. And I think, especially in a huge state like California, even though we're promoting all California native plants, you don't want to plant a redwood tree if you're living in the valley. And so, you know, as you have mentioned the phrase right plant, right place, and that's really, really essential. So if you can figure out what kind of soil you have, and also start to look at what plants are actually native to your zip code, then it gets really interesting to see what kind of wildlife you're supporting, and building those bridges that are very natural to what was here previously.
Exactly. And the zip code, you can go to calscape.org and put in your zip code, and it will give you an amazing list of plants with pictures and advice on how to grow it, where to find it, what it needs, what it doesn't need. So there are resources for you. That's also in the DIY guide. As there's a link, it'll take you right there. So you were talking about seed. We have a question about seed. Can we get seed mailed to our houses?
Yes, you can. We do mail order seed. And we also do some custom mixes if you have a special project that you're interested in doing. So those are all available online. And when you go to our website, it's a little bit confusing right now because it's a new system. But when you go there, there's a big message in the center that says online store, and you just click that and it will jump you to the online store.
Awesome. All right, we have an interesting
question. I want to jump in with one comment, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'm not throwing Home Depot under the bus, believe me.
I think it's okay.
A while ago, they were selling plants like this, plants called from the Smart Planet, okay? So I bought a couple, and they all died. And what I understand is that a couple of these plants have been treated to not allow insects to land on them, so that they've got some kind of pesticide in them.
Wow.
It's not the answer. It's a good attempt, okay? It's not the answer. And I, for years, have wanted to lobby them, and Lowe's and Armstrong and, you know, Ace Hardware, please start stocking native plants. But we're up against huge lobbies of companies that mass produce these ornamental plants. And it's hard to resist them. You know, every time you go into one of these stores, you see these rows of things in bloom and they're beautiful. I mean, I miss them too. I'm from the East Coast. A lot of the plants are from the East Coast where I grew up, but I resist because I really have been transformed since I moved to this coast. I've been here 30 years and I just want to go native now. I'm just so enjoying our native plants.
That's great. So we have an interesting question. What is your stance on compost tea? Does it have too much nitrogen?
So the native plants don't need any soil amendments, but composting is fantastic. We're really glad that you're doing it, and it's great for your vegetables if you have a vegetable garden. So the problem with putting them on natives is that they're not used to it, and so they're going to grow really fast and really big really quickly, and then they're going to pass away. So they're just not built for that. But it's such a great way to tackle your food scraps. And also if you end up with extra, we have a worm bin and a compost outside, and we share it with our friends and neighbors. And so it's a fun community project as well. And I'm sure, Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I have 2 dry compost bins in my backyard. Now, that term means that I don't really do anything. I just throw my scraps from the kitchen, you know, from vegetables and fruits in there. And then I see that, oh, it needs some leaves. So I grab some leaves from my avocado tree, dry leaves, I put them on top. And then I see, gee, maybe it needs some greens. So after I cut the Bermuda grass pathway lawns that I have, I put that on top, and maybe I'll mix it once or twice a year. And then I use it. I actually use it. I mix it in with dry mulch, and I put it around areas that get a lot of heat in the summer to help insulate the little bit of moisture in the soil. So the natives then get a little bit of, you know, vitamins and fertilizer from the compost, but not too much, so they're mainlining. And the problem with using things like Miracle Grow and all of those wonderful fertilizers, it's as if you're putting your plants on crack cocaine. They will go crazy for a while, and then, like Erin said, they will just drop over dead from exhaustion. So you really want to pace it. You want to replenish your soil every year. You can use the compost that you're creating in your backyard, but don't mainline it. Mix it in with dry sticks and leaves and things that are going to taper it and calm it down so the plant can absorb it over time slowly with rains that are coming.
And a great point about mulch. When in doubt, more mulch. If you're having trouble keeping your soil moist, every time you water it, it's like dry and hot the next day, add mulch. I use mulch for everything. So great point. What about using a little bit of that compost in your container plants?
I think it probably depends on the plant. I don't have a great answer for that one. Lisa, what would you say?
Well, I have a patio in my backyard where I have a lot of container plants, not by choice, let me tell you. Over the years, you know, a client, gee, I can't use this plant. Would you take it? And I hate letting anything die. So they're in these pots. The problem is they're captive audiences. And Nessa started the Grow Native program a couple of years ago where we were encouraging, especially residents of Playa Vista that don't have big swatches of land, but they have patios. You can do these, you know, container gardens, and you can. You just have to pay a little more attention to the plants. Remember, they have nowhere to go. The roots can't stretch out. So just be gentle. And if you're going to put compost, I would dilute it. I would mix it with regular dry soil. Just to make sure you're not giving it to, because I've had several plants, the reason I'm saying all this, where I've watered, and then all of a sudden I'm smelling something at the base of the pot, and I can tell that the soil got too wet for too long, and it was starting to get stinky. which isn't the worst thing in the world. It tells you there's a lot of bacteria going on, but it's too moist. And sometimes you have to replant, you know, sometimes you've overdone it. So it's a balancing act with potted plants, basically. Try it. You know, be a scientist. Don't go by us. We're kind of learning as we go too. A lot of the advice that the experts at Theodore Payne and that I give and Nessa is from years of experience, trial and error. You're kind of like a car mechanic. You know what could be right, what could be wrong. You're testing. The plant can't talk, so you don't really know what's going on. Again, use your eyes, observe, see what's happening.
Stick your fingers in the soil.
Yeah. See
how wet it is.
Mm-hmm. And soil should smell good. You know, you should be able to smell it and go, that smells wonderful. And of course, while you're doing it, you're getting calm because it's great for your endomorphins. That's a whole other story and a whole other subject for another time. Soil is very good for you in many, many ways, for many reasons.
Right. With container plants, because they are a captive audience, you may once a year need to add a little bit of that fertilizer that we never tell you to use on anything. But again, you want to dilute it, and there's a recipe for that in your DIY guide. So it just gives them a little bit of boost because they've already sucked all the stuff out of the soil that they're living in, and you don't want to have to repot them every year. So you need to give them a little bit of extra nutrients, but also you could just add more mulch. All right, any other questions for our fabulous plant experts? We'll wait a couple seconds to see if anybody's still typing. Thank you so much, Erin and Lisa, for taking the time to hang out with us today and showing off your poppy shirts. We're at the end of poppy season here. Mine have finally given up, but we look forward to seeing them next spring. All right, if anybody ends up having another question that they didn't think to ask, feel free to email me. If it's specific to Erin or Lisa, I can forward it to them and get an answer for you. As soon as this webinar recording finishes processing, which seems to take a little while, we will get it up on the Grow Native website or the Migration Celebration website. So if any of your friends or family didn't get to join, feel free to send them the link. Or if you want to rewatch Lisa's garden tour, you can do that as well. All right, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the Theodore Payne Grow Yard or at one of the other nurseries. Have fun with your native plants. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Also, feel free to share pictures. If you do plant a native garden, we love showing pictures of the success of that, of people getting out there and playing in their gardens. We'll share it on our social media so that we can make other people do it too. So lead by example, inspire people, get out there and grow native. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, you guys.
Happy migration celebration. Thanks.